Hello, and welcome to the first meeting for the Parent Guardian Caregiver Advisory Group for the Hamilton Wentworth District School Board Safe Schools Action Plan. My name is Sharon Stefanian. I am a Superintendent of Education with the board responsible for the Safe Schools Action Plan as well as student mental health and well-being. Throughout this presentation, I will be joined by Jason Rizza, Principal of Safe Schools, and we welcome you to an overview of the first meeting that was held with the Parent Guardian Caregiver Advisory Group on December 1st and 2nd. Thank you for taking the time to view this information. We would like to take a moment to reflect upon the land that we are privileged enough to be situated upon within our community. The Hamilton Wentworth District School Board acknowledges our presence on ancestral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee Confederacy land as determined by the Dish with One Spoon Treaty. The Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt represents the treaty relationship between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and Anishinaabe with respect to sharing the land and resources thereon. The intent of this agreement is for all nations sharing this territory to do so responsibly, respectfully, and sustainably in perpetuity. We respect the long-standing relationships with the local Indigenous communities, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and the Six Nations of the Grand River. The agenda on the screen is the agenda that we followed in our virtual table meeting sessions with the Parent Guardian Caregiver Advisory Group. And while some of the agenda items are interactive, we do want to highlight them for individuals who may be rewatching the video after the meeting or for those who may be interested in having an understanding of what happened at the meeting the first time. So we've already begun with a little bit of a welcome. We will then move to a thank you. We'll spend some time talking about MS Teams, the vehicle that we're using for our virtual meetings, and getting to know everyone around the table. We then like to move into what we heard through the work of the Bullying Prevention Intervention Review Panel, as well as what we continue to learn, all of those pieces informing our commitments and our action plan, which was shared with the community last spring. We then turn our attention specifically to the focus of the Parent Guardian Caregiver Advisory Group and their function, and really seeking perspective from those who are most impacted by the work and centering their voice. We were looking for an understanding of how people would like to provide input into the work that is happening connected to bullying prevention and intervention. And then we invited participants to provide feedback to staff through a survey tool, allowing us to ensure that we are meeting the needs of participants as we continue to go forward. We want to take a moment to say thank you. Thank you to the students, the parents, guardians, caregivers, the community partners, and staff who took the time to share stories and experiences with the Bullying Prevention and Intervention Review Panel. We appreciate the commitment that you have to addressing bullying within HWDSB schools and within the broader community. We'd also like to thank the parents, guardians, and caregivers who are giving of their precious time to continue to support this important work within HWDSB schools. Everyone who is gathered around the virtual table or who is reviewing this slide deck this evening has many demands on their time, and we truly appreciate you prioritizing providing us with your perspective and your lived experience related to bullying within HWDSB schools. The contributions of the time and the courage to share your stories also led to the suggestions and ideas that came forward that were highlighted within the panel's report. All of those have been included as part of the board action plan, which is available on our board website. Suggestions and ideas, as well as new suggestions and ideas, are welcome as we continue to do this important work together, because we appreciate the commitment and the dedication to supporting us in making our classrooms safer spaces. Thank you for coming together as a community to contribute to this important work. Together, we are and will continue to make a difference for our students. While we are hopeful that it won't be much longer before we are able to meet in a face-to-face setting, in the short term, we are continuing to use Microsoft Teams as the vehicle for our online conversations. Participants are welcome to use their camera and to leave their camera on throughout the meeting. However, we also respect that some individuals may prefer to not have their camera on, and so please do whatever makes you comfortable. On your Microsoft Teams screen, you should have a toolbar. The toolbar may be at the top or the bottom or the side, depending upon your Teams setup. The key icons, if you are using Microsoft Teams for the first time, that you will use most frequently as we continue to gather are the microphone button, which will allow you to mute and unmute your microphone. We ask that you keep your microphone muted while we are meeting, unless, of course, you are unmuting it to ask a question or to make a comment, to share a suggestion. Sometimes background noise may make it difficult for others to hear. There is the camera on and off button. Again, please feel free to use as you are comfortable. There are three dots, and those three dots or ellipses will open up the device settings within Microsoft Teams, and this is where you will also find the setting to turn on live captions. We will continue as we go forward to provide voice over PowerPoint sessions so that you will have the opportunity to go back and to listen to meeting content again. Throughout, extremely important that we are hearing your voice and your perspective. So feel free to use the raise hand, lower hand feature if you have a comment, or also to use the chat feature and to enter your questions or comments in that area. And when our meetings end, of course, the leave button to hang up and to leave the call.
The discussions about relationship issues can be deeply connected to a person's identity and their experiences as they relate to that identity, including racism, classism, ableism, sexism, misogyny, homophobia, biphobia, transphobia, faith, and many more, and are often framed historically and culturally through the lens of colonialism. As such, we encourage participants to reflect upon the emotions they may be feeling, arrange for a support person to be available to them after the meeting, and to reach out to the facilitator who will be able to assist them if they experience discomfort. Staff remain behind at the end of each session for those who are triggered in any way and needing support for next steps. During both sessions, participants were invited to participate in polls and chats. Polls presented difficulty to some, and we are working with IT personnel to rectify this for our next meeting. Both the Safe Schools survey as well as the community consultation provided the panel with insight into the extent of how significant the problem of bullying is in HWDSB schools and our community. According to the survey, data collected pre-COVID, almost 60% of HWDSB students had been bullied at any rate, and 20% reported being bullied frequently. We heard that certain groups experience bullying at higher rates. For example, students who identify as Two-Spirit LGBTQIA+ were particularly vulnerable. Throughout the consultation, many students shared they had experienced bullying as a direct result of their race, ethnicity, newcomer status, sexuality, gender identity, disability, religion, and Indigenous identity. The panel's literature review and consultations confirmed what many already know that bullying causes significant harm. Bullying victimization is associated with low self-esteem, loneliness, depression, anxiety, suicidality, and poor academic achievement. We also heard from both the survey and consultation that bullying is most likely to take place in areas of little or no supervision, such as during breaks and outdoor recess. When it does happen, we heard about inconsistent processes for reporting and responding, as well as poor communication. Phrases like a lack of action and poor follow through were used frequently throughout the consultation process. We heard from everyone, including educators and administrators, that there is a lack of role clarity, transparency, and accountability when it comes to bullying reporting and response. Many staff recognize they play a critical role in bullying prevention and intervention, but spoke of not always knowing how to respond appropriately when they witness an incident of bullying. Staff want practical, targeted training and knowledge. Educators and principals are critical champions for positive school climate and effective bullying response, but we heard from all that curriculum expectations, multiple competing priorities, and inability to effectively utilize community-based expertise and resources makes it difficult to respond to bullying effectively. Everyone spoke of the need for more and better mental health supports in schools, both to prevent bullying and to respond after bullying incidents occur. What we have heard has necessitated that we commit to a firm direction that focuses on being transparent with respect to our Safe Schools Action Plan. Regular updates will be shared publicly throughout our work. We will continue to develop, collaborate, and review structures that are reflective of the voice of all our community and use that voice to inform board and school planning that again will be shared publicly. We continue to explore and develop multiple ways of engaging and receiving feedback from those most impacted by our decisions to ensure that our work is collaborative and reflective of their voices. And finally, we heard loud and clear that we've got work to do in rebuilding trust with students and families. We know that listening and responding to the voices we hear in a way that demonstrates we've listened is the first step to doing this. Parents, students, staff, and community are all encouraged to take a look at our Safe Schools Action Plan on our website as demonstrated in this slide. Parents, guardians, caregivers, staff, and community are all encouraged to visit our Safe Schools website where they can see our Safe Schools Action Plan in greater detail. We would be happy to schedule time to review any aspects of the plan that are of particular interest or to clarify anything else you may be wondering with respect to the plan.
Last spring, we took the opportunity to meet with a number of students, parents, guardians, caregivers, community partners, and staff to engage in conversation around how best to hear and respond to the voices of those who are most impacted by bullying prevention, intervention, and responding. How do we hear from those who have experienced bullying, have witnessed bullying, or who have engaged in demonstrating bullying behavior, as well as their families and others who are impacted? As a result, we developed a structure that we are hopeful will provide opportunity for individuals to come to the table to inform the strategies within the Safe Schools Action Plan. Connected to that is the establishment of 3 community-based advisory groups. We have a student advisory group that has been populated by HWDSB students in elementary and secondary schools. Membership on the advisory groups continues to be open on an ongoing basis, and individuals who may be interested in joining are encouraged to go to the board's website under bullying prevention and to email directly to indicate an interest. All groups are meeting virtually at this particular point in time. The student advisory group is being co-facilitated by youth. One of the youth is a recent graduate from HWDSB who has lived experience as a youth who has experienced bullying. We will be looking for another student from within that group who will act as a co-facilitator. We heard very clearly from our student population that their preference is to engage with youth, for youth. Staff will be available to provide support and follow up for the student advisory group, but really ensuring that students are facilitating students or youth are facilitating youth, and that opportunity to hear that extremely important voice throughout all of the work that is happening. The group that was gathered around the virtual table for this session was our Parent Guardian Caregiver Advisory Group. We held 2 sessions because the number of individuals who responded to the invitation to participate was quite high. We had over 60 individuals who had RSVP'd to attend the session in December. In order to provide opportunity to ensure there was availability for voice, we broke it into 2 sessions, but each session were identical. And the third group, the third advisory group, is the Community Partner Advisory Group. Again, a very important perspective. Organizations, individuals from organizations who are doing grassroots work within the community, working with children and youth who have a commitment to addressing bullying within schools as well as within the broader community. So turning our attention to the parent guardian caregiver group and the focus of this particular group. This group's work is focused on providing thinking, input, and feedback to the working groups who are focusing on 10 different priority areas related to bullying prevention and intervention. Within the work of the Safe Schools Action Plan, we have identified 10 priority areas that we need to address as we are looking at making improvements and changes with respect to bullying prevention, intervention, and responding. We heard loud and clear that we need to be doing some things differently and that we need to be considering how we can ensure that we are communicating with families more effectively around the nature of the work that we're doing. We also heard, as I had commented earlier, about the importance of voice, not only gathering the voice, but sharing back what we heard and what we did differently as a response to the voice. So we are hopeful that the advisory group structure, and in this case, the Parent Guardian Caregiver Advisory Group, will provide the opportunity for those at the table to review the draft strategies coming forward from each of the 10 priority areas. And I will highlight those priority areas in just a moment. All of the draft work of each working group will come to each of these 3 advisory groups. So advisory group members will have an opportunity to see all of the draft recommendations, the draft strategies before they move forward. The perspective of our students, our parent, guardian, caregivers, and our community partners with respect to this work is extremely important, and we're very appreciative of your participation in this process. We are now going to dig a little deeper into the structures as well as the working group areas. As we had just shared, we have 3, and you can see them in golden yellow, advisory group structures. Our students, our parent, guardian, caregiver, and our community partner advisory. As you will see, there are 10 working group areas, and the commitment is that the work from each of these working groups will, in draft form, be shared with the advisory groups for feedback, input, and suggestions. In addition, individuals who are participating in the student advisory, the parent, guardian, caregiver, or the community partner advisory group are invited to participate directly in the working groups. As part of our feedback for this meeting, individuals will be invited to indicate their interest in joining one of the working groups. Again, those who are around the virtual table, your commitment is to be part of the Parent Guardian Caregiver Advisory, and you will have the opportunity to inform all of the working groups. However, we also invite your voices and your perspective directly at the working group table. I will also share that all of the work of the working groups will be shared in summary form after each meeting so that our students and our parents, our community partners, our staff have the opportunity to see in draft form the thinking of each of the working groups along the way. There are other structures that will be available for individuals to share their thinking on the draft work, and that includes the Safe Schools Dropbox option, which is going to be designed by our student advisory table. It will be a place where individuals can provide thoughts, reflections, and thinking on any of the work that they see posted on our board website connected to the work of the working groups. Let's now dig a little deeper into each of the working groups for a shared understanding of what each of the groups are working on. The first group is the Student Voice group. The Student Voice group is going to be focusing on how we gather student voice at a school and system level. How do we gather the voice? How do we utilize that voice in making decisions? What things change as a result of that voice? And reporting back to students so students know that we heard them and what we did as a result of what we heard them say. Student voice is extremely important. Not only is there a dedicated working group to student voice, but as we have talked about, there is an advisory group for student voice. Student voice is integral in all of the working group areas and extremely important that those who have lived experience, particularly those who have lived experience related to bullying, have their voice heard and their perspectives reflected in the work that we are undertaking. The other area that the Student Voice Working Group will be focusing on is connected to a new role within HWDSB, which is the Student Ombudsperson role. That role was introduced in September of 2021, but there are many operational elements of that role that are yet to be determined, and Student Voice will play a critical role in that process. The Student Ombudsperson acts as an individual who will work directly with students and with families when there are concerns around incidences of bullying in schools. They will and can connect directly with the school on the behalf of the student, on behalf of the family, and can also support follow-up, particularly if there are questions or concerns that the student or the family have. What is yet to be put in place is how do we best communicate to students and families that this resource exists? What is the best way for students and families to be able to access this resource? How can we ensure that access is barrier-free? So the Student Voice Committee is going to support working through many of the operational components connected to this new role. This role, as I mentioned, is already operational, and students or families are welcome to reach out at humanrights@hwdsb.on.ca, and that's human rights, lowercase, one word, no space in between. The second group is the School Improvement Planning Group. So the School Improvement Planning Working Group is going to be looking specifically at the development of tools and resources that will be used by schools to support them as they create their school improvement plan, with a prioritizing area and focus around positive culture and well-being, and specifically connected to that, bullying prevention and intervention. This particular working group is going to be looking at how schools set targets and goals with respect to bullying prevention, intervention, and responding, how they're going to track the implementation of their strategies, and how they will measure whether or not there has in fact been improvement. This group will also be looking at the important elements of connecting voice from students connected to the first group, but also connecting voice from parent, guardian, and caregiver. And again, not only how to capture the voice, but also how to share back what we heard and what we have done as a result of the voices that we have heard. The third group is the group that probably has the broadest mandate, and that is the bullying response group. So there are a number of different things that this working group is going to be looking at. They will be looking at the development of resources and materials. We certainly heard the importance for our students, for our parents, guardians, caregivers, and our staff to have information around bullying prevention, but also to have information around bullying response. And when bullying happens, what can be expected as a response. So preparing learning material will be an important part of the work of this group. In addition, this group is going to be looking at the strategies that we put in place to prevent bullying in schools. Many around the table may have heard of Reimagining Wellness, an initiative that focused on safety, inclusion, belonging, creating conditions for connection and relationships that was part of the reentry to school for the first 6 weeks. That's part of the important work of addressing bullying from a proactive stance. Bullying, as we know, is a relationship-based issue, and the focus in the first 6 weeks of school around creating spaces where students' identity are centered and also for creating connections and relationships is foundational for the proactive work. And Reimagining Wellness will continue throughout the course of the year and into next year with different foci at different points in time. This group is also looking at how we respond when bullying occurs and really ensuring that there is clarity around communication. We heard from students as well as from families that it wasn't always clear what was happening after the incidence of bullying was reported. So we know that we need to look at how we change and ensure that the communication is transparent. We also need to ensure that we are looking at learning within the context of incidences of bullying, shifting behavior, and ensuring safety. This includes the development of a student safety plan, which is also part of the important work of this group. And the bullying response table is also going to be looking at documentation and reporting with respect to incidences of bullying. The fourth working group is a working group that is going to talk about and focus on where bullying happens in schools. Generally, what we heard from students was that where there are not adults present is where the opportunity for bullying exists. So this table is going to have a very targeted focus on how we can support schools in identifying where bullying happens, and then to specifically look at what are the strategies that we can put in place in a proactive way to address these areas within schools. This includes working very closely with partners around what potential solutions may be. You'll also note on the slide that it talks about supervision. Supervision is very formal terminology that is used and speaks to the number of minutes in which staff are available for supervision within a school. Those number of minutes is something that is beyond the influence of this table and other tables, as that is a provincially based conversation. However, what happens during those minutes and other strategies around how to address where bullying happens in schools will be a focus of group number 4. Group number 5 is focusing on special education. The recommendations within the Safe Schools Action Plan or the action areas with respect to special education really speak to continuing work that was already underway within HWDSB. So that work will continue. Much of that work is closer to completion than some of the other areas as a result of the fact that it was already ongoing. The Bullying Policy and Procedure Group is going to be looking at the revision of our HWDSB bullying policy as well as the related operational procedures. The Ministry of Education did release new guidelines With respect to bullying in schools in the month of November, and our revised or our new policy and procedure will be reflective of the information that is contained within that directive. Our commitment and our target is to have that policy finalized and approved by the end of this school year, and we'll move to staff training and implementation for the 2022-23 school year, for the next school year. The seventh working group is going to be working on the elements of healthy relationships. As discussed earlier, we know that bullying is essentially a relationship-based issue, so we want to have a focus on building healthy relationships, looking at social emotional skill development and what are the essential skills for students to develop in terms of building healthy relationships, dealing with issues of conflict in productive ways, and how to support overall student well-being. That's the focus of working group number 7. Working group number 8 is a group that will be focused on a data strategy specifically connected to bullying prevention, intervention, and responding. What is the data we collect? How is the data stored? How is the data shared? We recognize that there have been questions around what bullying data looks like for HWDSB. How do we ensure from a data perspective that there is accountability and transparency? Does the data show that the strategies we're putting in place are making a difference? Are we seeing improvements? All of these are extremely important questions, and so identifying the measures and determining the reporting approach in support of accountability and transparency is all part of the work of working group number 8. Working group number 9 is also a group that will complete their work by the end of this particular school year, and their work is focused specifically on privacy and the development of a guidance document around what information can be shared and can't be shared when there is an incident of bullying in an HWDSB school, ensuring that there are resources available for school staff as well as for students and for parents and guardians and caregivers, so there are no surprises. So there is that shared understanding of what will be shared when an incident of bullying has occurred and has been addressed by the school. And the final group is the performance monitoring group. We need to be looking at, as the strategies coming forward from all of the other working groups are being put into place, how do we measure as a system that we are making a difference? How do we measure what is being implemented, what is having an impact, and what areas may require a tweaking? The work doesn't have a final completion date. We know that it is important to always go back and to review where we are and where we have been and to continue to make improvements. Now you will notice that there is a poll question on this particular slide, and in our virtual session at this point we were asking participants to share with us through the chat which of the 10 areas they were most interested. This is not and was not a commitment to participate in a working group, but we were looking to get a sense of the areas that our parents, guardians, and caregivers were seeing as first priority and that individuals were most interested in. Again, the work of all of these working groups will in draft form come forward to the advisory groups for input, for thinking, and for feedback before moving forward. Centering the voices of those who are most impacted by the work is priority as we continue to go forward. At this point in our virtual meeting, we turned attention to gathering information from those who were participating on how they would like to be informed and provide input to the working groups. We recognize after the first initial meeting, there may be individuals who decide that this particular structure is not the structure for them, and we completely understand and honor that decision. As I spoke about a little earlier, through the Dropbox, there is opportunity for individuals to always provide feedback to the working groups. There also will be a pop-up structure. We held our first pop-up last spring. We'll continue to hold pop-up structures, pop-up sessions when there are specific questions that working groups have for either parents or for students or for our community partners. However, for those who continue to gather around the virtual table, it was important for us to hear how we best meet your needs in hearing and gathering your voice. So some of the ideas included reading drafts of the material coming forward from working groups and then having the opportunity to email input in. Also, there may be some around the advisory group tables who would like to be part of working groups, as we've discussed earlier. For all of the working group recommendations, there will be an opportunity to listen to a short presentation at the advisory table and then to provide input through the table. But there may also be other ways in which individuals would like to engage with the draft material and to provide feedback. So at this time, individuals were provided with an opportunity to share with us their ideas and their thinking around what approach would best meet their needs as we go forward.